1960s. After visiting the Aeronautics Department of Indian Institute of Sciences, he decided to pursue his dreams. It's the new millennium. The successful test flight of the light combat aircrafts put India into an exclusive league of countries that design and fly their own supersonic fighter jets. Not just the brightest step in Indian aeronautical industry, but this crucial step is also critical to India's development as a scientific power. And the realization of this aeronautical dream has been part of the vision of one man who has always dreamt his nation to become an effective state.
I'd like it to be a country which is strong, confident, working for peace throughout the world. The strength and the confidence should really come from the growth of our science and technology.
Professor Roddam Narasimha, an aerospace scientist and fluid dynamicist. If the milestones in the field of aeronautics are to be defined, one cannot afford to bypass the contributions of Professor Narasimha. And his journey of flying aeronautical miles began before his graduation, when he had visited the Indian Institute of Sciences.
But I must tell you that at that time, that was the most unpopular decision. Aeronautics was seen as not having any prospects at all. And all my friends said, you've done so well in engineering, why do you waste your life doing aeronautics? Well, I must say that the only person who supported me was my father, who said, well, if that's what you want to do, why don't you first go talk to this friend of mine at the Indian Institute of Science and see what he says. So I went to his friend, who was a professor in the institute, and he said, don't be a fool, don't study aeronautics. And I went back to my father very dejected and told him, your friend says I shouldn't do aeronautics. So he asked me, what do you want to do then? I said, I still like to do aeronautics. So he said, well, go ahead and do it then, he said. And that was the end of the matter.
During the graduation, Professor Narasimha got the opportunity to work closely with late Satish Dhawan.
Now, he was not a professor at that time. He was a young man. He had just become an assistant professor and had come back from the California Institute of Technology with a PhD and with a great reputation for the research work that he had done there. So at the end of 2 years, I had helped him do some work and even did a little bit of research at his suggestion. And so once again, I had to decide at the end of 2 years what I would do. And fortunately for me, once again, Dhawan said, why don't you consider doing some research? So once again, I stayed at the institute for 2 more years doing research.
In mid-90s, Professor Narasimha held the reins of National Aerospace Laboratories, one of the largest aerospace firms. As a director, he initiated and oversaw several major technology programs of the country.
So with the encouragement and support of both Professor Dhawan and Mr. Rajmahendra and Dr. Uluri, we started thinking about small aircraft. The first one was made out of kits by my colleague Dr. Damania. It was a kit all out of fiberglass from the United States. It was an aircraft called the Long Easy. Then we made our own light aircraft called the Hansa, completely designed and made at an end. And then we started thinking about larger ones, and the Saras seemed the logical choice, what became the Saras. At that time, there was a great deal of interest in an aircraft of that capacity, 14 passengers going up to 19 passengers, multiple roles and so on. And the Russians approached us saying, we read about your aircraft project in one of these international aeronautical magazines, actually Flight, published in England. And so we would very much like to join you because we are also in that aircraft. So it actually started out as an Indo-Russian project, Indo-Soviet project. And a lot of work actually was done by the 2 teams together.
The contribution he made as a part of Hindustan Aeronautics Limited at both technical and policy-making levels still remains unprecedented. In 1982, He founded the prestigious Center for Atmospheric Sciences, now called the Center for Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences. While heading the center, Professor Narasimha was involved in variety of research programs covering wide variety of topics within the broad realm of atmosphere, ocean and climate science. His contribution, which revolves around the tropical climate with a focus on understanding the monsoon and its variability, has proved to be the most relevant study to our society and its future. Born on 20th July 1933, Professor Narasimha spent his childhood in Basantgudi village of South Bengaluru.
My parents, my grandfather and my grandmother. We were always a big joint family at that time. But when I was a young kid, I was the eldest child in the family. There was no other company, children's company at home. So one of the things I remember, reinforced by what my mother used to tell me, is that I used to go round and round in the living room conversing with an imaginary friend of mine. For some reason that I cannot think of now, and I have absolutely no idea how it happened, that imaginary friend of mine had a Western name. He was called Klein.
A profound thinker, Professor Narasimha has always been a keen observer and a reveler of the fascinating life around.
Well, I must say that I am fascinated by many things. I am fascinated by history. Time and again, what actually happens in reality in the world is so different from what we expect and what the experts predict. Something is there in human nature which we just don't seem to understand.
Accolades and praises have always been the part of his pursuit, but there are also few unexpected fallouts, and of course, his better half is the best person to tell about it.
Problem in our house is books. There are so many books that we don't know where to keep them. You can see them on the staircase as well. See, I mean, over the years his food habits have changed dramatically. He now eats almost very sattvic food. If he has some dal, chawal and dahi, that's more than enough for him. See, he's not the traditionally dressed person. He says, I wear what I am comfortable in and I don't care what other people think about it. See, I mean, I have an unconditional regard for him, that is sure. He is a great scientist, and as a husband I have no this thing against him at all. I mean, no grudges.
I'm afraid that I didn't spend as much time with my family as I should have, but I hope I can keep making compensations for it. They've had to get used to my frequent absences from home, and that's something I regret very much, very often.
Be it aerospace technology or fluid dynamics, atmospheric convection or science and technology policies, as Professor Narasimha keeps striding new scopes and limits, these fields certainly will get off to a flying start with his vision.